I recently had the opportunity to speak to a city planning commission about a applicant's desire to demolish a historic landmark to presumably build some kind of stupid apartment complex on that land, and I got to tell them why I thought that was stupid. Even more recently, I got the opportunity to attend a anti-ICE expand the general strike protest in Salt Lake City, and I have to say, I think my 90 seconds speaking to the City Planning Commission was an order of magnitude more cathartic and honestly more useful for effecting change than the 9,000 seconds I spent traipsing around Salt Lake in the march, which is unfortunate because the march was obviously regarding a much more important issue, the situation in Minneapolis with ICE right now. For the former situation, honestly, I was terrified, but when I pushed through that and I got to the other side of that experience after I got up and spoke, I was so empowered. I feel like I could have moved mountains, and I also got to immediately see the impact that I had made and the impact that everybody else had made when they chose to stand up and speak at the commission. For the latter situation, I was so enraged at the murder of Alex Preddy that I cleared my whole evening for this protest that I'd heard about. But about halfway through the demonstration, I was asking myself why I'd bothered to come out at all. Whatever self-righteous indignation that I'd had that had motivated me to go out to the protest in the first place had faded away, and I ended up leaving about halfway through. I decided that day that I was done attending protests like that, and I just went to my truck and I went home. And to be honest, I feel conflicted even saying that out loud, especially on camera, but it's the truth, and I feel like I have some good reasons for saying so. So I hope you will hear me out and give me a chance to explain myself. And I also have what I think are a couple of great ideas that could transform these kinds of protests into an experience that I think actually does move the needle in our favor. And I've even got examples. Okay, I've got big examples to share with you. Big example, that's what they called me in high school. They did not call me a big example in high school, but they could have, because I'm 6'5", so I don't know what the example would have been, unless they were making me an example, which they did actually once. I did get pantsed at gym one time. I don't know why I'm saying this. I'm gonna go back to the script now. So first of all, I can't help but feel this very particular, disheartening, emotional incoherence at the protests that I attend in Salt Lake. And it has been this way for a very long time, at least since 2020. And for me personally, each of these protests unfolds in almost the exact same way. The anti-ICE general strike protest was honestly no exception. This is the process. I live my life, I learn about some new, horrific thing that the Trump administration has done, I get angry about that, I hear a protest being organized about the thing that the Trump administration has done. I go to that protest because I'm angry. I arrive at the protest. Nobody is angry. In fact, people are just laughing and chilling and talking, and a lot of the signs there are communicating something that is direct and to the point, that is honest to the times that we're living in. And then there are other signs that are very cutesy and jokey and funny, and it's almost... it's like almost cringe humor, to be honest with you. And the atmosphere is just one that's communicating that these problems are almost like abstract inconveniences rather than like signs of a fascist takeover, which would warrant some rage. So sorry, but where is the fucking rage? Where's the sauce that got me out here in the first place? Where's the anger? Where's the self-righteous moral indignation that just calls a kettle a kettle? I feel like I get rug pulled every time. The advertisement calls for revolution, but the actual event delivered feels like a rowdy HOA meeting at best. And then it feels like a insincere performance to go around and chant the chants and yell the profanities. I just hate it. I just hate it. Second thing, these protests in Minneapolis right now, in Minnesota right now, are honestly so amazing. They really, really are. ICE morale is in the toilet. I think just the other day, they also withdrew about 700 of those oinkers from that state, which is amazing. They've got, what's that guy's name? Bongino, that old lesbian-looking guy. They got him out of the state, which is a moral victory more than a functional one, but we'll take it. Connecting migrant families with food so they don't have to leave their house that would expose them to risk of capture by ICE. Like, everything about this is incredible. The people in Minneapolis have made it their life's mission to make ICE's work as difficult as possible. And I think that's incredible. And that's the kind of protest that I have an appetite for. I want a protest that functionally does something. You know, besides like incidentally blocking unrelated traffic for an hour or two. The car honking, the whistles, the tracking, the strategizing, the overall incredible organizational effort right now is just amazing. That's what I call effective resistance. Versus this marching, chanting thing that we do in Salt Lake. It sucks. I think it sucks. I'm sorry. I hate to say that, but it honestly kind of does suck. And I don't like saying that because I don't want to neg people that are trying to do good work, and I don't want to dissuade people from actually taking to the streets and using their voices for things that really matter. But I also think it's important to be honest, and I know I'm not the only one to feel this way. Now, to be fair to Salt Lake, I understand that a lot of the fire fueling all of this movement and this organizing and strategizing is because ICE just blatantly murdered two of their own in cold blood. That is certainly something that would lend a movement some fire and purpose. And we are more than 1,000 miles removed from that, and it is no wonder that we wouldn't have the same capacity and emotional response that they would. I get that. We are in totally different regions. Salt Lake is not under siege like Minneapolis is. It's not going to be the same, no matter how effective an organizer might be. But at the same time, I know our protest scene could be so much better, and honestly, it's our responsibility to make it better. So those are my two main gripes. There's this emotional bait and switch, and then 90% of the time, there's no direct action associated with the protest. I do, however, think there is a very simple solution to both of these problems. For the second problem, I think it's mostly just a matter of identifying something that can affect a change and then directing people towards that, the action that would affect that change. Not just calling for something to be different, but actually doing something that would motivate it to be different. I have a great example I can think of. For you out-of-staters, you might not recognize this stupid, shiny face. You might not recognize the name Mike Lee. But us Utahns, we know him as the great enemy who somehow keeps winning re-election for some reason, even though he routinely pisses off both sides of the aisle. But I guess that's besides the point. He is one of our senators, unfortunately, and every few years he cooks up a brand new scheme, some new pot of political bullshit to sell to everybody that is always ultimately designed to sell off all of our public lands to the top bidder so we can have multiple Kennecott mines instead of just one, which is already not only a huge eyesore, but is actually actively hurting the respiratory health of literally everyone in the valley. Did you know that Utah regularly has the worst air quality in the country every winter? That's fucked up. Last year, ya boy, friend of the show, he tried one of his schemes again. He put forth a bill, and the response to that from local Utahns was immense. It was honestly so heartening because the entire state turned their attention to him, laser focused, and they engaged in like a multi-pronged attack specifically aimed at defeating this bill. We had customers of all of your big outdoor retailers urging those companies to make public statements condemning the bill. We had people phone banking his DC and his local Utah office, leaving voicemails. And for one particular group of organizers, it wasn't enough to have like digital stuff that's like easy to ignore. You can have thousands of digital files on a computer, right? It's not very visually impressive. It's easy to compartmentalize and put away. One group of organizers decided we're gonna write a bunch of handwritten letters and send brigades of hate mail trucks to his office in Salt Lake. So these comments from his constituents would be physical obstacles in his office that him and his staffers would have to step over. It's like a cynical Miracle on 34th Street, except instead of sending letters to Santa Claus, we're sending him to a big, stupid fucking idiot. But regardless, that was the part of the organizing that I was specifically involved in. My friends Kat and Anthony invited me to a public letter writing event, and in a couple of hours, hundreds of letters condemning Mike Lee and this bill were made and prepared for delivery. And I think within a week of this bill being floated, he withdrew it. We whooped his ass, basically. And that experience was so rewarding because, one, it got the result that we wanted, but two, the process of effecting that change involved me in some way. I was doing something with my own two hands that resulted in a change. This protest was guided, it was purposeful, and had a very clear, concrete objective that everybody could contribute towards. And for those reasons, we won, and we got the bill defeated. More of this, please. It would not be too difficult to turn a protest into something that has a very targeted, measurable, specific goal. Like, even if the protest had been sent towards the ICE field office near the university rather than the immigration office and like blocked their traffic in and out for a few hours, even that would have been a disruption of some kind, a tangible disruption, instead of, just yelling at the immigration building and just yelling out into the streets, or even organizing that protest to funnel those people to call landowners who are leasing warehouses for ICE operations in the city. Like, give these people something to do besides yell and walk around. Give them a way to directly engage with the things that they're protesting against. Another reason why I think it's really important to directly engage with the forces that control us is it makes it far, far easier to tap into that rage, that self-righteous indignation, that moralizing that really fuels people to take action and to see the world outside of their own personal orbit. From what that anti-ICE protest took from me emotionally, that little city planning commission thing that I alluded to earlier gave me in spades. I'll give you a little bit more context for what that was to make my point. So just for a bit of context, there's this awesome 140-year-old paper mill in Cottonwood Heights, and everything around the area references this. There's an old mill plaza, there's an old mill shopping center, there's an old mill everywhere, okay? It's the coolest structure in the area by far. And we just, out here in the West, we don't really get that very often. The East Coast, you've got all kinds of old stuff. Europe obviously has old buildings out the wazoo, but we don't really get that here, especially not in Salt Lake. There's so much potential in this space to be like a rec center or a public arts center or something like that. It has a courtyard that could be an amazing venue of local music, all kinds of stuff. But in any case, the landowners, the people legally responsible for being the stewards of this building, have just completely neglected it. They're letting it rot away, and they're claiming that the building is just too far gone to save, and it's become a public health hazard and should be destroyed. Maybe a very profitable apartment building replaces it. Who knows, right? That wasn't officially in their little application, but let's be real here. It wasn't going to just turn into a duck pond. So luckily, word got around that there was going to be a public comment on this application to demolish the old mill, and locals showed up. My friends Sierra and Sarah invited me to tag along, and it was our understanding that in order to speak at the public hearing, you'd have had to have submitted a public comment beforehand. So we were just kind of going to learn more and maybe show some moral support for the people who were going to speak up in favor of saving the old mill. We get to Cottonwood Heights City Hall, and the commissioners are on their their bureaucratic pantheon. I don't know what you'd call that. Just they're all at their desk, and there's the empty podium there. And the lawyer and the applicant, they make their case. I think their case is full of holes, and I think they're stupid and ugly, and I don't like them at all. But at some point, the community gets a chance to also make their comments. And the people who requested are allowed one at a time, in a very neutral, polite, respectful tone of voice, air their grievances. They were politely torn to shreds, basically, by the community. It was amazing. And then, because time allowed, there was actually a opportunity for people who wanted to speak, who had not yet spoken, to request to speak and have something to say at the podium. And I asked my friend Sarah if she was going to go up and speak, and she said yes, and she hastily threw together a couple of paragraphs. And even though she was terrified and had not prepared anything in advance, she went up there and eloquently spoke in defense of the old mill. And I remember thinking to myself, I had no plans to speak at this, but I was just so inspired by her bravery and the bravery of everybody else who had gone up to speak. These are, some of these people that spoke are just sweet old ladies who were also terrified of public speaking. And it was just this moment of like, well, if they can do it, so can I. And I didn't have time to write anything. I think I wrote a single sentence before it was my turn. I didn't have much to say, about 90 seconds worth, but the feeling of power and agency that I got from that experience gave me fuel for activism like nothing else has since the Bernie campaigns. It was honestly amazing. Not a single voice in that room spoke in favor of demolishing this building. And the Planning Commission was forced to acknowledge how asymmetrical the desire was to go forward with this proposal. And they were also forced to publicly acknowledge that nobody believed the landowners were being adequate stewards of this historical monument. So that would have to be something they would factor into their decision later down the line. And this is not like a glowing, perfect, flawless victory, but it was a step, and being able to see immediately the impact of everybody standing up and choosing to speak up in this way, in this moment, was incredible. That is what I want from a protest. I want to feel like I have agency, and I want to feel like what I'm doing is meaningful because it's affecting change. That last part is so important. Now, this kind of leads me to my other solution for the problem of the emotional incoherence that I keep encountering at these Salt Lake protests. They're marketed as revolution, but they turn into like quirky sign competitions. I think the emotional heart of any protest should be accessible, clear, and actionable. Salt Lake City is not under siege from ICE right now. ICE is not shooting Utahns dead in the streets. There are not highly visible ICE operations taking place in Salt Lake right now that present themselves as easier targets for protesting or disruption. So for all of these reasons and more, I think that general strike / anti-ICE protest that I went to really didn't have much of a chance of moving the political needle that much. I think it was too broad. I don't think it presented its goal as very actionable, and I think it felt kind of confused for that reason, and therefore more difficult to emotionally engage with it. Maybe that's just because I couldn't hear any of what the speakers were saying, but I think the point still stands either way. And then for people like me, this anger that we have doesn't get redirected anywhere, and it no longer has an opportunity to affect change in a meaningful way. I think one change that would have had me as fired up at that protest as I had been at that planning commission thing would have been to change the emotional catalyst for the protest. Rather than market this anti-ICE / general strike expansion, SOCDEM socialist uprising thing, I would have instead turned it into a solidarity march for the amazing protesters in Minnesota and Minneapolis. Let me tell you why. I think the work that they are doing over there is absolutely amazing and inspiring. And their courage and their bravery, and they're literally risking their lives, as we've seen, to do this incredible work, to fight these fucking pricks. It's just so incredible, and there's so much that people all across the country could take from this. That like this is truly inspiring, and the work, that the effective work that they're doing, the achievements that they've been able to pull off with the wind down, the 700 pigs that have pulled out of the state, the symbolic but still meaningful victory of sending Bongino, or whatever his name is, away, the migrant families they've been able to protect by helping them put food in their fridges without directly risking those migrant families. Like, this is so amazing what's happening here, and I think the story is right now so focused on everything ICE is doing wrong, which I think is valid, don't get me wrong, but I think there is something else here that is being overlooked that's really valuable, and that's the inspiring resistance that's happening at the same time. And this celebration of their courage and bravery, I think, is something that is easier to emotionally connect to people that are not in that situation. Salt Lake is 1,200 miles away from Minneapolis, and ICE has not murdered our neighbors yet. We are not under siege. We don't have thousands of those pricks marching around destroying lives, and when they are, they're not doing it very visibly. And I think for that reason, it's really hard to get a sincere, furious mob organized for some kind of direct action protest like what they're doing in Minneapolis. And to be clear, the Solidarity March is more than just letting them know that they're not alone, that they are inspiring people all over across the country. That is very important. But aside from that, this is also an opportunity to directly help them, those protesters in Minneapolis. How hard would it be to get a email list or some kind of donation system organized to funnel resources to those people that are affecting this change? You know, there are organizing groups out there that need money to afford these groceries, that to afford these protests, like radios and shit like that, or even to organize during this protest a phone banking session for the Minnesota AG, who is for some reason not issuing an arrest warrant for the ICE agents who murdered Renee Good and Alex Preddy. You know, like these are tangible, actionable things that can be motivated by a sincere, emotional vehicle, which is just the inspiration and solidarity that we feel with the protesters in Minneapolis. I feel like that is the direction that I would have gone with it. I think we're just too far removed from the barbarity of ICE to organize a protest that is motivated by anger, because there's just not a lot to do with that anger here. And you know what? If you show up to this solidarity protest with some anger, that's great, because this protest is gonna have something for you to do to channel that into something productive that can shift the political needle or literally help the protesters in Minneapolis. Like I said, the AG phone banking thing, or even organizing, like, you know, hitting up all the Dems who voted to improve additional ICE funding. You know, like there's so many ways to direct the energy that these injustices are producing, and it doesn't have to be LARPy, and it doesn't have to be insincere. I think there are so many different emotional vehicles that can create change, and I just think here in Salt Lake, removed as we are from a lot of the worst of the stuff that's happening, I just don't think the angry chanting and marching around is gonna do it for me. In any case, if that was the kind of protest that was marketed to me, a solidarity march where we're getting together and celebrating the incredible bravery that's on display and letting them know that they're not alone. Additionally, we're organizing ways to help them in their fight and pressure their elected officials to actually step up and help them. I'd have been screaming myself hoarse at this protest. Fucking give me the pussy hat even. I'll put that on the whole time. If you can't give me a vehicle to channel my anger into change, then either change the emotional catalyst or connect the protest to action that can. I think that's the simplest way I can describe it. I think that's doable, and I think Salt Lake City is hungry for activism like that. And it honors the emotional intensity that we have here, which is, like I said, removed from a lot of the worst things that are happening. Can we realistically get hundreds of people to disrupt the ICE field office here in Salt Lake for days on end? Probably not, but could we get hundreds of people together for a few hours to direct them towards like a very specific targeted action? Absolutely, 100% we could. Now, in closing, thank you for being here. I've been rambling for quite a bit, but I just wanted to close this off by just saying that I'm not a professional organizer by any means, and I understand that this is probably not as easy to implement as I might think it is. There is a lot of incredible organizing, and there is a lot of goodwill and good faith that goes into trying to get people to look up from their own 2 feet and give a damn about things that are happening to other people that they don't know. I sympathize with the organizers here in Salt Lake that are just trying to do what they can to do good, and I just want to take a second to acknowledge that. I hope you do not interpret this as me condemning you for trying and thinking less of you as people or activists or organizers. That is far from the point. I see room for improvement, and I know I'm not the only one who feels this way, and I hope this is interpreted as kind of a general piece of constructive feedback, a general open letter to the protest scene here in Salt Lake. And I'm gonna cut it here because I've been talking for a long time, apparently an hour and 45 minutes, and I'm thirsty. And I think I got the point across anyway. I will see you all later, and don't forget, don't let the bastards win. I'll see you later.